It's Shani on Shani Speaks Now.
Hey there, Faith Fam. It's your girl, Shani here, and I'm back with another episode of My Fill in the Blank Story, a live interview series where I aim to amplify the voices of women as they share their reproductive health journeys. In this episode, I spoke to Adriana Skinner, a mom, author, and public health professional. She shares how lupus affected her pregnancies with her 3 sons and the loss of her sweet infant son, Beau. It's a very powerful conversation, so be sure that you stay tuned because it's a conversation you definitely do not want to miss.
So first and foremost, thank you all so much for taking the time to come on live. This is my fill in the blank story, and it is all about reproductive stories that we're sharing that are real, that are transparent, women who are brave and courageous enough to share their stories on all different types of topics that are reproductive related. And today's story with Adriana Skinner is my lupus and infant loss story. She has a very, very, very dynamic story, and we're going to go through it. But one of the things she also has is a book that she wrote. So we're also going to talk about her book because it's not just about, obviously, people sharing their story, but if they've created resources, if they have things that they are willing to share and that they put out in the world, I want to make sure that I share those things too. And hopefully you all, if you need those resources, will be able to have them. Now, usually I know a lot of the people that I go on live with personally. She's actually the second person that I don't know personally, but one of my cousins, Denise, beautiful girl, they are related technically.
Yes.
And when I did a IG live last year, when I shared about my miscarriage and I was highlighting a book that really, really helped me, she shared about her book, but at that time I wasn't doing these lives. And when I finally decided that I was going to do these lives, I reached back out to her and I wanted to know more about her story. And thankfully we've been able to do that since. And that's the beauty about technology. That's the beauty about this life and this world, is you can be connected to people that you may have never even known before. But obviously sometimes your stories connect you. And even though we have different stories, we both have stories within the reproductive space. For those of you that are coming on for the first time that have never known me, my name is Shani Jones. I am a speaker. I'm a content creator. I'm a host. I've really become a women's health advocate. I consider myself a fibroids and miscarriage champion. This is something that I've really, really come to care a lot about. And I'm also a realtor here in Orlando, Florida. So that's a little bit about me, and why I ended up starting this in the first place is because of the experience that I had over 2021 and 2022 when I experienced not one, but 2 fibroid surgeries and also a miscarriage. And I realized that in sharing my story and being vocal, one, it kind of cut down on this being these being taboo topics. But also I realized that there was so much healing in me sharing. And as I've done these lives, I've realized for a lot of these women who have shared their story, there's a lot of healing that takes place for them as well. Now, the good thing is that for Adriana, this is not the first time that she shared her story. She's had opportunities to share on public platforms, and I'm glad that she's getting a chance to share here with my audience and also on YouTube. So once I get this all wrapped up and packaged, it'll be on YouTube for you all to watch as well. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Adriana and give her the opportunity to share a little bit about herself before we dig right into her dynamic story.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. I am a mother of 4. I have a beautiful bonus daughter, and then I have 3 beautiful sons, one of which who I unfortunately lost in 2020. Yeah. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But I have definitely had a journey when it comes to my reproductive health, starting from when I was diagnosed with lupus at 17 to kind of the unknown of what that would look like for me. Right. And then the journey that I've been on, also having experience being pregnant both in the United States and in Europe, which is really interesting for me. I never thought that I would be here in this space talking about my loss, talking about, how that loss has impacted me, and then also about my book, which has really been a healing and therapeutic tool for me as I've moved through this journey of not only child loss, but also like healing from child loss, and advocating for women and talking to women and helping them kind of circle back to God and know that everything that happens, He is in control of. Absolutely. And kind of understanding that we might not know the answers, and that's okay.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that's literally where this has all stemmed from as well, is realizing that, there's a point and a purpose, and we may not always understand it and we don't get it. But, something that we've talked about is the fact that he can make beauty out of ashes. And that's something that he's been able to do for both of us. And I love that you have also decided that in sharing your story that you also want to advocate for women, and that's a little of your profession as well. That's kind of something that's dear to your heart. Talk a little bit about that too, in terms of what you do career wise.
So my background is in public health, so I have always been an advocate for preventing any sort of disparities or preventable diseases or anything like that. My family has a business, House of Skinner Wellness, and we advocate not only for our youth, but also for women's health and men's health, and kind of a holistic approach to everything. So I've always been in that space since I started my master's in public health, and then I kind of went into the crunchy route when it comes to women's health when I was pregnant and learning a little bit more about like diapers and breastfeeding and that. But always had an interest in women's productive health when it comes to disparities, especially in the United States. And so now I've, talked to a lot of my sisters in love about their experiences being pregnant, having babies, all of that. And coached a lot of my friends through like, you can do this in labor, or this is what you're meant to do, and all of that. So I have kind of took that on as kind of like a passion project or passion purpose, instead of like, I don't get paid for it, but I get paid in like joy and like seeing all the babies. My sister-in-law, who I think I saw on here, she always calls me like the baby whisperer. So I'm just in that space, just kind of like in the tribe.
Yeah. I love that. And I mean, again, it's also a personal choice to do that. There's women who go through these things and they never talk about it, and that's their prerogative. There's some that feel that, speaking out on some of these things is your own private business and you shouldn't. And again, there are others like us who realize that for some of it, you do have to ring the alarm, because there are people that are dealing with these things. I will never forget how many DMs and text messages and meetups that I've had since sharing about not only my fibroids, but miscarriage, because people are wanting to talk about these things, but don't have the outlets. So I'm glad that you are one of those out there that are willing to share your story, and that's doing a little bit more and going a little bit further. So let's get into your story now. I didn't realize this when I talked to you. I knew that obviously that you had lupus, but I didn't realize you were diagnosed at 17, which is a super young age to be diagnosed. How has lupus kind of played a role in your health and your life leading up to, of course, your pregnancies?
So I was diagnosed at 17. Nobody really knew what was going on. And then when I was diagnosed and they kind of found out that I did have lupus, I have the lupus that impacts my kidneys. They said, okay, so it's either going to be this type or this type. And if it's this type, I forget what term they used. We're going to have to start chemotherapy, which could impact your fertility. Or it could be this type and we start immunosuppressants. So at that point, I'm in the hospital room with all of these attending, students. And I was like, well, if that's the case, then I'm having a baby. I'm having a baby immediately. I'm 17. I can do it. I remember telling my mom that, because she was like, oh, well, what about freezing your eggs? I said, I don't even know how. I can't wrap my head around that right now. Like, if that's the case, like I need to do this now. But at that time I had a nurse that actually did have lupus. She had children. She was like, lupus is different now. There's so much more research now. Plenty of women with lupus are especially if you have lupus, are having healthy pregnancies, having healthy babies. Because a lot of times in the past, it was women, especially Black and Latino women, were not diagnosed until after they had a child, and after your body had already been through so much stress. Where there was like a point of no return for your kidneys or your body or anything like that. So for me, I was diagnosed early. It didn't impact. There was no scarring. There was no permanent damage to my kidneys. It was more so, it hit me really fast, and I was able to, my body reacted well to the medication. And then I was on the medication through college. And then right in 2009-ish, I actually weaned off all of the immunosuppressants.
Wow.
So my lupus became like inactive.
Got you.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you do realize at some point, obviously, you get married and you're starting your life and you are finally able to have your children. And I remember you sharing that with your first two boys, which, how old are they now? I know
Junior is 8 and Cruz is 6.
Aww.
Yes.
So with your first two boys, you didn't realize, I think until after you had your second one, that lupus actually played a role in you being able to actually carry your children to term. When did you find that out, and how did you see that that was an issue? What were they seeing that lupus was kind of affecting with your pregnancies?
So my first pregnancy I had in Germany, and in Germany it's very different, very holistic. The OB's there. You get to see, you know, an ultrasound every month. Can you please take the dog out? I'm busy. Sorry. And I had a very, very healthy pregnancy. I carried small. Just meaning like my belly didn't go out very far. I was very, very petite. And I was super healthy. Like I was already into fitness. I was already like mentally, I was into yoga, all of that. I was a registered yoga teacher. And at that point, there was no question about the lupus. She knew I had a history of it, but that it wasn't active.
Right.
So my first I had spontaneously at 31 and a half weeks. And at that point, there really was no question. It's hard to tell when it's your first pregnancy, especially if you know, all of your levels are the same. So like my kidney levels, you know, my hormone levels, all of those were healthy. Yeah. So she really didn't know why. My second pregnancy, I started my second pregnancy in Germany, and we started progesterone because she thought maybe there had been a dip, even though I had just seen her that week before. Right. There had been a dip in progesterone, which caused the spontaneous. Of course, at that time, I then moved at 30 weeks, 31 weeks. I moved from Germany to here, to the States. At that point, the doctors told me that it was possible that one of the reasons why Junior came early was because of the lupus, and that as women, specifically women with lupus of the kidneys, it could cause, you know, your body gets to a point where it's either like, I have to deliver this baby, or or your body is going to suffer from it. Wow. So for my second, they were like, if you haven't had the baby by 38, 39 weeks, we will induce you. And then he actually ended up, my water broke at 34 weeks and 6 days. So right before 35 weeks. And that was spontaneous as well. Wow. Didn't know why. After I had Cruz, I did end up having a lupus flare. So at that point, all of the numbers were showing it was either postpartum preeclampsia or a lupus flare-up. And it was a lupus flare-up. Yeah.
Got you. Wow. Well, thankfully, even despite those flare-ups and despite what happened, you were able to have your two boys successfully. One that we saw scatter around the back, which was so cute. And you are mothering, so don't support
mothering. I'm
that's
multitasking as
what it's about. So don't even worry about that. It was cute.
Yeah.
But so you've gotten through that. Now, before I kind of go into us talking about your baby Beau, I do want to kind of touch back because, like you said, your husband was in the military. You all were stationed in Germany. Your first experience with childbirth in Germany was, you know, a full experience there. And then I guess almost most of your pregnancy for your second one. Obviously, you know, being in Germany and being in the US, and we've heard, you know, you can hear stories. I mean, I know like in Canada, they have like almost a year and a half of like, you know, being able to be home with your child, just all these different things. So, I mean, obviously different countries do things differently, but I know that you noticed some differences in terms of your care being in Germany and then being in the US. Talk a little bit about that, because I found a lot of that very interesting when you shared.
Yeah. So, an interesting thing that I found in Germany was that doctors do not deliver the babies unless it is like an emergency C-section. Midwives, all hospitals are staffed with midwives, and midwives are the ones who deliver the babies. So it is a very respected position, you know, being able to deliver babies. And they have all the things in there. So they have like the ropes hanging from the ceiling. They have the showers. They have the tubs with warm water. They have the peanut balls. They have the yoga balls. You can labor standing up, which is what most it felt most natural for me. You can labor standing up. If you do require any sort of pain medication or pain management, they have all sorts of different options. There's laughing gas, there's muscle relaxants, there's walking epidurals, which I hadn't known. It is an epidural in your back, but it's like an IV that you can like walk around with. I actually don't know if it's in your back. Let me take that back. It is a walking
Right.
But you can walk around. Women can eat and drink and have Gatorade in your last meal, all of that, because their mentality is that you need the energy in order to actually push a child out of your body.
Right.
And because they're not thinking about, oh, I need to be able to prep for surgery just in case. That's not how their mentality is. Midwives are like, you can do this, your body can do this. So you need to eat, you need to drink, you need to sleep, you need this, you need that. Another thing that I really enjoyed about Germany was if I had been a local national or on a German contract, I would have been able to work at least 1 year paid and then 1 year unpaid, but still hold my position. If they also have their universal health care prescribes a 𝙁𝙤𝙙𝙙𝙬𝙙𝙬𝙬, which is a midwife or like a postpartum doula to come to your home. So you don't have to take your baby out to do any of the like first appointments. You know, they weigh your baby there. They take the different measurements. They show you how to bathe the baby in like a bucket, like the little water bucket. They do like postpartum depression screenings, that sort of thing. And I need you guys to please go. Please just go in the living room for a second.
Apparently they also want to be live.
Yeah, exactly. And because Junior was born early, they actually wrote me a prescription for a 𝙁𝙤𝙬𝙬𝙬 to come and visit me for longer. If I had been on the German insurance, I was on TRICARE at the time, so it was a little bit different. But I thought that was great. I mean, to not have to leave your home. In my culture, we do la dieta, which is 30 to 40 days of broth and soups, belly binding. Yeah, belly binding. Don't pick up anything unless it's the baby.
And then that's your family is kind of there helping with. I mean, my family's Caribbean.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe I don't know if it's 30 or 40 days, but they sure enough are here trying to take care and do all the things whenever that time comes.
Right, exactly. And it's not to leave the house with the baby unless it was a doctor's appointment. And in this case, they would have come to me. So it was very centered around the mom and the child. It was just amazing. I remember I had congestion and I asked the doctor, oh, is there anything that I can take? And she was like, no, you can't take anything. Drink this tea.
Right.
I was breastfeeding Junior and he would have gas or constipation and I would go to the apotheca and I would be like, hey, what can I, is there anything I can give him? Are there any drops? And they said, nope, you drink this tea. It was like a fennel seed tea.
That's good.
Or fenugreek. And you drink it. And then if he needs a little bit of it, give him like an ounce.
Wow.
And you both will feel better. Or they had this like essential oil balm that you rubbed on their belly. So it's very, very holistic. Yeah. Even after I had Junior, instead of Pitocin, they're not pumping you with Pitocin. They gave me these like sugar, they almost look like nerds, and put it in my mouth to help contract my uterus to deliver my placenta.
Wow.
So it was very different. Here, I go in to have cruise and I'm like, well, can I labor standing up? I had to sign waivers. I was like, can I get a Gatorade? They're like, no, you can barely have ice chips.
Oh, Lord.
I remember when I was being induced with Beau, the same thing. I was like, well, I know how it goes with U.S. hospitals. So before you guys induce me, what I'm going to do is, Terrell, I need tacos. I need a big old Gatorade. I need, all the teas that I can have because it's totally different. I mean, here it's very much medical centered. So they want to make sure if in the event you need to have a C-section, you're ready to go. Yeah. Whereas there and
it's almost like that's
totally different.
Yeah,
it's totally different.
Wow. I find it so interesting in terms of them allowing you to have your child or labor standing up, because I know if you really go back in time, Native Americans, a lot of African countries and villages, literally their women have their children standing up, and midwives are used in many of those places to help. And I know here in the U.S., while obviously midwives can be used, sometimes it is not, depending on where you are and what hospital, it can be frowned upon, or they may not be able to, be there at that time frame. So I think that's a very, very cool aspect that you're sharing.
Yeah.
And hopefully, when it comes to those things in maternal health, things will get better. I know we've seen reports recently from Beau, the Olympian that, unfortunately had her baby at 8 months by herself. Know that, Black maternal health and even just maternal health for women of color has not always been the best. So hopefully those things will definitely improve here for the U.S. But I just found it very, very interesting to kind of hear your story in regards to that. So let's move on to Beau. You obviously got to a point with your lupus where it was under control again. I think you were taking some medication that kind of, also helped, but it was safe, and you were able to get pregnant with Beau. I remember you sharing that I think you all started trying in November of 2019, and by December of 2019, Beau was on his way, correct?
I got pregnant with Beau Christmas of 2019.
Aw, that's a very, very happy Christmas gift for that year, for sure. So in terms of your pregnancy with Beau, how did that go despite everything?
Yeah, so I after I had Cruz, I was on an immunosuppressant that was not safe to be pregnant on. And then once I talked to the doctor, I was like, hey, we're wanting to expand our family. Can I be put on, either can I be weaned off or can I be put on something that is safe?
Yeah.
And there is the one that I'm on now, and the one that I was on at that point is completely safe to be on when you're pregnant and breastfeeding, which was huge for me as well. And I was feeling healthy. I hadn't, my levels were normalizing and everything. But because lupus can be hard on your body, they want you to be on it kind of what is it called? Proactively.
Gotcha.
So I was on that, and very healthy pregnancy. I want to say probably around 4 months. I went in for 4 or 5 months. I went in for an anatomy scan with the MFM because I had had the other two early, and he always liked to snuggle with my placenta, so it was very hard to get certain readings for his heart specifically, and I didn't think anything of it. And then they said to come back in a week or two to see if they could get better images. And then that day, he was a little bit different, differently positioned, and they saw that. What they saw was, instead of the two great arteries that come out of the heart being crossed like this, they were side by side, which meant that he had transposition of the great arteries, or congenital TGA.
Gotcha.
And they said, because of what we see, we want you to go see a specialist. So I went to see a pediatric cardiologist, and she confirmed that obviously they can't see, nothing is determined until the baby is actually out. But at that time, it was COVID.
Yes.
I was in the room by myself. My husband wasn't allowed to be in there with me. My face got hot. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. I held it together in the doctor's office. And I was like, you know what? I trust God. And immediately got to my car and broke down on the phone as soon as I heard my husband's voice. But knowing his diagnosis helped us to be prepared for when he was coming. So I'm grateful for that, because even though 1 in 10 children is born with a congenital heart defect, the majority of them, well, a good portion of them, I don't know the statistics off the top of my head, but a good portion of them are not diagnosed in utero. Gotcha. So a lot of times women won't know until after they've had the baby. And so I was grateful that I knew that. I was grateful for COVID, actually, because it allowed me and my sons and my husband to be in the house together to fully experienced the pregnancy altogether.
Yeah.
And then it was at my 30s, and I was on progesterone shots also. So to prevent preterm labor, I was getting the shots. But then at 36 weeks, I went in for my non-stress test, still doing good. She measured my cervix and everything. But he kept having D cells in his heart rate that weren't coinciding with the contractions. So because of his heart, because of the history that he has with his heart, they wanted to send me to the hospital for a longer non-stress test.
Gotcha.
So I immediately did that. They confirmed that he was having these weird D cells where they would just go down, not coinciding with my contractions. And they said that they wanted to induce me. That way they could, figure out what was wrong with his D cells, if it was because of his heart condition or what. And when they told me that, I was in the hospital from that point on.
And that was what, like late August of 2020?
So that was August 17th.
Okay.
Yeah, August 17th of 2020. And I was in the hospital from that point until, he was born on the 20th. And when they told me they were going to induce me, they told me what they were going to do, the Cervidil, the this, the that, the Pitocin. And I was like, well, I don't want Pitocin. You guys can do the Cervidil. But then I went down the list of all of the holistic ways to induce labor. So like pressure points, the foot massages, the pineapple, the spicy foods, the castor oil, the teas, everything, peach, something tea, red raspberry leaf, everything, to see if I could induce or like open my body naturally. And then instead of the Pitocin, even though the doctors didn't believe me when I was like, this is going to happen really quick, I promise you. They were like, oh, well, you've never been induced before. I said, I know, but like once we get the ball rolling, it's going to go really quickly.
That's so cool that you were able to school them on a little something.
I was. And when they did everything, they put the Cervidil in, they took it out for me to labor to see what my body did naturally. And then they said, at this time, we're going to do Pitocin. I said, well, at this time, can you just break my water instead and let me labor standing up?
Wow.
And they did. They respected that. And then, but because they wanted to have the monitor on my belly, they made me labor on my back, like laying down. And that was so painful compared to my other labors. It was super, super painful. To the point where I was like, can I get some laughing gas? Can I get like an ibuprofen at this point? Anything. And then at that point when he was down in, in my pelvis, it was so hard to find his heart rate that I was just like, I'm over it. Like, I'm just going to get on all fours. And I was doing like cat cows, and I was just moving with my body. I didn't care what the nurses were doing around me. I didn't care. They were like trying to come up under me with the little monitor. I was like, you guys don't know what you're doing. I need to do this. And then I felt the urge to go. And I said, can someone check me? And they were like, oh, well, I don't know. It's probably not. And I said, no, I need someone to check me. And she checked me. And then she was like, next time, just push a little. And she goes, oh, somebody get Dr. Kelly in here. And so, and he came I was told at the pediatric cardiology appointments, I was told I wasn't going to get to hold him. I wasn't going to get to do skin to skin. He would be rushed off somewhere. That I would need to be discharged before I could even see him because he has to go to the other hospital. I was just incredibly grateful that he came out, and I might cry.
That's okay.
He came out crying, like a nice, strong cry. He was nice and pink, It turned out that the D cells were because he had the cord around his neck.
Oh, wow.
So thank God that they saw the D cells, because as he had gotten bigger, it might have been more of a problem. I got to hold him. Me and my husband got a picture holding him. And then my husband was able to go and be with him in the NICU, CICU actually, at Children's, while, they did everything with me. They took the placenta and this and that. And then I was also very surprised at how this particular hospital, compared to the one I delivered at in Virginia, was not very supportive for breastfeeding unless you actually had your baby. There was no cleaning supplies for all of the pump parts. They didn't really give you any bags. They didn't give you a big jug of a big water jug. Whereas the hospital that I was in, Virginia, did. I mean, it was like, here's the cleaning supplies, here's the wipes, here's the this, here's the tub full of whatever. It was just different. Even within the U.S., things are very, very different.
That's true. Because a lot of it has to do with what resources certain hospitals have, what funds that they have. That can make it very, very difficult from person to person. And thank you so much for sharing, because I know that it is not easy to share, even though I know it's something that you've shared a million times over, but this is still very much your story, and things can hit at different times. So I do want to acknowledge that. And girl, if you have any moments where you need to give yourself a moment, please do that. I saw
usually it's that pinch right here where you're just like, oh, it's gonna come, and then you kind of have to breathe through it.
No, I get it. And the thing with grief too is it comes in waves. You don't know, as you're sharing or as certain things come to mind, you don't know when and what is going to hit and when it will hit. So listen, I understand. I saw someone mention same, I think when you were talking about just laboring on your back and the pain from that.
It's totally different. Like if anyone on here is going to have a baby anytime soon, try not to go to the hospital as soon as you think so. Try to labor at home as much as possible. Try to eat a meal, even though it's probably the last thing on your mind to do. Get a lot of water, because they're not going to they'll let you be super dehydrated in just the IV, but your mouth can't, and try to labor. And you are allowed to labor standing up. Just to clarify, you are allowed to. I told the doctor when he came in front of me, I was like, I don't want to be cut. Do not cut me. And I had told them initially, I don't want Pitocin. I want, my water to be broken and for me to be able to labor. And, I think because I had had 2 babies already, because I had done all of this research, I felt more empowered to, be able to make those decisions and not be bullied, because it was really just me and my husband. But I do know that a lot of women, especially for their first time, are like, oh, well, they're the experts. They're the experts. And I remember telling my sister-in-law, who's the one who said same, I remember telling her, you can do this. And as soon as you feel this feeling, just know that the baby's about to come. So you can push through it and you can do it.
And that's so good for you to share, because again, it is empowering for women to know that this is something. He's so cute. Is this Cruz? This is Cruz, the second one?
Cruz, yeah.
Okay. But it's so empowering to know that we can advocate for ourselves, because you're right. It can be intimidating to, especially your first time. So it's intimidating if you've been a first time mom, but it's intimidating anyways when you've never had this experience. You don't know what to think or what to do. And then to try to stand up for yourself with doctors. And I mean, there's been so many stories and so many reports that, I've heard from people who didn't know what to do, felt something was wrong, or felt that they were in pain, and only come to realize later that, they could have died if they didn't say anything, or, something was worse off than they realized that it was. So I'm glad that you're really telling women and people in general, and this goes for husbands too, because sometimes we may be out of it. So, if there's, and I do know that there's some men that have come on this, and I'm glad that you all are here, advocate for your significant others, advocate for your partners when they are there. Make sure that all of you, the baby, whoever, get out of the hospital together and alive. And just ask. It never hurts to ask.
And you also have the right, if you feel those microaggressions, you also have the right to ask for like a patient advocate and or a different doctor.
This is good information. This is really good. Thank you.
A different nurse, a different doctor.
Oh, this is good.
You can ask for like somebody to be there on your behalf. Like, this doctor's not listening to my wishes. Can you please, I need someone here. Or this nurse keeps ignoring my questions. She's not talking to me directly. I've told her X amount of times. Then just say, I need to. And there's always a charge nurse on the floor. A charge nurse is the one who's in charge of all the nurses. And you have every right to do that. And then also, if because there's tons of microaggressions that happen all the time. And are we becoming more aware of it? 100%. But there's also a certain amount of political correctness that I feel like we all try to do and move in, especially when it's like, I'm really not trying to argue with you. I'm trying to have this baby.
Right.
But if you feel that, just know that you are your and your child's best advocate. Yeah. And if you need to have someone step in, whether it's your husband, whether it's a doula, whether it's a patient advocate, whether it's a nurse that you connect, like if you find that one nurse on the floor that has your back, be like, I don't want you, I want you as my nurse. Please be in the room and be with me, because it does make a difference. Like, I mean, especially with Black mortality rates, Black maternal, infant and maternal mortality rates, like it makes a huge difference.
I see a couple comments of people saying yes, that they've done that, their husband advocated for them. So it's definitely true, and I'm glad that we are talking about that, because that is something that is important. I remember hearing a story of a woman, I think she had already had one baby, and her experience was so terrible that when she went to have her second child, she went in with like cookies and gifts for all the nurses, because she wanted to like get on their good graces to make sure that she came out alive. And it should, like, we shouldn't have to coax people into doing their job to take care of us. I don't think people realize that when you are dealing with having a child, it's literally a life and death situation, no matter what. Even if the pregnancy goes well, there's things that can always go off in the middle of a labor and delivery. So it's always a woman that's putting her health at risk, putting her life at risk. So it's something that we definitely need to pay more attention to. So, of course, now Beau is here and he's made it, and he did have to go into surgery immediately, even though you all thankfully were able to get a chance to touch him and to hold him and do those things, and your husband was able to be with him. Tell us a little bit about his surgeries, and then kind of what it was like for those was it roughly 2 months that he was here? So the 2 months of, what it was like while he was still here with you all during that time.
Sure. So, unfortunately, because of COVID, my older sons were not able to come and visit him. But we were told initially that the type of heart defect that he had was actually like the best one to have, because it's only one surgery to switch the arteries, and then he won't need additional surgeries like some other congenital heart diseases.
Right.
We were told, he'd be in the hospital for 3 weeks, and then you just have a lot of follow-up after that. But that didn't end up being our case. So he had his first surgery called a balloonectomy, something like that, where they take a little balloon and they open up the hole. There's a hole in part of the arteries that allows for blood to flow.
Got you.
And everyone has that when they're born, and just when you're pushed out of your mom, it kind of closes on its own. But they opened that up so that way inside of his heart was mixing both oxygenated and deoxygenated blood to hold off for the surgery, because basically what he had was the blood that was circulating to his body was all the deoxygenated blood.
Oh wow.
Like it was that was coming out.
Yeah.
That's like the heart is divided like this, and it was coming out.
Yeah.
So that allowed for the blood to be both deoxygenated and oxygenated.
Yeah.
He had his first surgery, which was successful. And then he was having some irregular rhythms, which is normal for after surgery, but they really couldn't find out why. They did a couple tests and they saw that everything was normal. They just thought maybe it's his heart needing time. Right. We had a couple experiences while we were in the hospital. He had sepsis at one point. We were able to get, upgraded or downgraded to the HKU unit, where they taught us CPR. They taught us how to help his scar in his sternum, and how to give him his medications, that sort of thing. And then he had to do a car seat test, and then we got to bring him home, which is probably still one of the best days I can remember. When the boys finally got to meet him, when he was in our home, when he was able to be in the bassinet, and, go through like normal life.
And what was the time span from you having him to finally being able to take him home?
1 month.
Okay.
So we got to come home on September 20th.
Got it.
So exactly 1 month.
Wow.
He was home for 3 days, and it was following so we had a pediatrician appointment on the 22nd. He looked a little gray-ish that day, like they call it molting.
Mm-hmm.
And I had asked the doctors then about if that was normal, and the doctor said yes. And then we got a call on the 23rd in the morning saying, oh, the pediatric cardiologist wanted us to go back because they didn't get a blood pressure reading. So when we were on our way out, I noticed that he was crying because he had just been asleep. He was crying. And then when I was getting him in the car, I noticed he was making a weird sound. And this time I cried too.
Take your time.
And when he was making that weird sound, I immediately was like, he's not breathing correctly.
Yeah.
And so I took off all his clothes. It was cold outside. I took off all his clothes. I started rubbing on his sternum, and he was still like kind of out of it. So I ran in the house. I called for my mom, who was thankfully there. And I just went into like go mode.
Yeah.
I started doing, my mom is a pediatric dentist, so she has to do like crash drills. And I said, Mom, he's not breathing. And she didn't know what to do because of his chest incision. She was like nervous to do the compressions. So I immediately called 911. I was doing the chest compressions. She was doing the breaths.
Yeah.
We were doing CPR on him. I just told my sister, and I called for my husband. I just told my sister, keep the boys upstairs. I was on the phone with 911 and just running through everything. I don't even know how all of that happened. But they got there, and by that time he had kind of come to. We had this owlet monitor that, you know, you put it on their foot, and it monitors their heart rate. And I put the owlet monitor immediately because I had taken it off of him when he woke up, because I don't need it when he's awake.
Yeah.
And I put the owlet monitor back on him, and his heart rate was fine. And, you know, when the ambulance got there, they didn't have like a mask small enough for his face. So I just kept doing the breaths. And we get into the ambulance, and they had to meet us on the side of the road with an ambulance that was equipped with whatever was needed. And they just kept saying, like, you probably just saved his life. You probably just saved his life. And we get to Annapolis ER, and they don't know what's wrong because now he's perfectly fine. And, you know, he's just, you know, and they said, well, we need to airlift him to Children's because we just don't know. We're not equipped to deal with anything. So first helicopter ride. But I just kept, so I have a family cousin, like deep in the family, whose son was airlifted somewhere, and her son crashed on the airlift. So I immediately was like, I'm like, my eyes are on him. I'm just watching him and watching the monitor and watching him. And we get to the NICU because the CICU requires that you have 2 negative COVID tests. We get to the CICU or we get to the NICU, and they're running all these tests. They're looking, the cardiologist is coming, everyone's coming in talking, and then he has another episode where he just, it's almost like his heart stutters.
Got you.
Which then causes, you know, everything to kind of
shut down
after that.
Wow.
So they then take him back to the CICU, but we were under quarantine protocol, which means I am stuck in the room, and everybody who comes in has like B suits on until he gets 2 negative tests, and I get 2 negative tests.
Wow.
At that point, the doctors told us, you know, the transposition surgery was good, but there's a stenosis, like a very like a stretching of the pulmonary arteries that connect to your lungs that must have been too thin. or too small,
Right.
too narrow, and that he needed another surgery.
Gosh.
So then another open heart surgery.
And this is only roughly a month later from his original surgery when he was firstborn. Wow.
Right. So he has another surgery. And what they don't tell you about the surgeries is like it takes a while to put the kids on bypass. Like it takes a while. It's like an hour to put them on bypass. And every time you go on bypass, it's like increased risk of all of these things.
Yeah.
So they do the second surgery. He comes out again, like looking like he's everybody's favorite baby on the unit. Like he's the baby that everyone was like, I don't even know why you guys are still here. I don't even know why you guys are still here. Because he looked that healthy. He was that healthy. Yeah. And this is why I say you really just have to trust in what God has.
Yeah.
Because it was then he was still having, so we were fine, got bumped down to the HKU unit. Again, everyone was like, oh, you guys are going to go home soon. And I distinctly remember we were watching 101 Dalmatians with my boys at home on like the iPad. And they kept pressuring me to give him a bath for some reason. They were like, oh, it's time for his bath. I'm like, well, he's asleep. And so I finally give him a bath. And he's crying and crying, and then he has another episode.
Oh, wow.
And I said, he's not breathing. And thank God for that nurse, because she immediately hits code blue, and it's just like everyone rushes in. She's doing the chest compressions. I am beside myself. I close the iPad. Everyone comes in because they still don't know why this is happening.
Yeah.
And I just distinctly remember my husband coming in with the food that he had went to go order, and I was just rebuking death. I was just rebuking death. I was in the corner, like, just praying and covering him. And I was just like, Lord, you're not taking, the enemy is not going to take him right now, Lord. I know that you are the God who can do miracles, so I need you to move right now. And so the same thing, like nobody knew what was going on. I kept asking if it was his coronaries, because part of the surgery is switching the coronaries.
Right.
And they finally tried to do another test on his coronaries. And it was then that he crashed again and then was put on life support. So at that point, the doctors came in and said, this is like emergency surgery.
Yeah.
This is like last resort surgery. We need to go in. We need to fix what's going on. Because it is his coronaries.
Yeah.
His coronaries are completely blocked. It's a miracle that he's been alive this long because the heart muscle was not getting any oxygen. And so they did the surgery. It was almost all day long. It was...
Yeah, I think you mentioned probably like 18 hours or something.
It was like 18 to 20 hours.
It just seems so on a baby. Like, I'm just thinking about how small
and their hearts are like as big as a walnut. Like they're teeny tiny. So thank God for the surgeons. And I just remember praying, and I wrote Romans 8:28 on the big board that they have. And at that point, the nurses are confused. I'm confused. The doctor's confused. And he came out of that surgery, thank God. And they do like brain monitors and all these things. Right. And I distinctly remember it was like 10 a.m. He had a brain scan and was fine. And then by 2 p.m., his pupils were no longer reacting.
Wow.
And they said, we don't know what happened, because afterwards we did the ultrasound on the head. We did all of these tests, and there was no issues.
Yeah.
And I remember my husband just walked in, and I told him what the doctors were telling me. And then they said, we need to do another CT scan, but they bring the CT scan in.
Yeah.
And when we came back, they said he had global brain injury. So not just a part of the brain.
Yeah.
It was whole.
Jesus.
And at that point, they said, you guys can go home and sleep on it and come back. We'll do another scan in the morning. There's entirely way too many machines in here. There was the life support machine, ECMO. There was the dialysis machine. There was, the brain scan machine. Like, I was in this teeny tiny little corner pumping. And we went home, and I just, all I kept asking God was like, whatever the decision is, I need you to make it very clear.
Yeah.
So that way I can live with what it is. And when we got in there, they did another scan, and it was even worse. The injury had gone down to his brain stem. So regardless of what was going to happen, he wouldn't have recovered from that. Because of the global brain injury, he was no longer a candidate for any sort of heart transplant. We still didn't know what his heart would have been, what his heart would have recovered like following the emergency surgery. And at that point, it was very clear, and I thank God for that,
And that's
very clear.
That's the thing, is you pray prayers and you don't know how it'll be answered, but he answered, he at least gave you the peace to, like you said, have a clear answer to know what it is to do. But it's still, it's difficult. I can't imagine.
Right. And that is actually something that I've connected with some moms with, especially moms who have either had to make that difficult decision or are trying to cope with the fact, like, well, why? Like, I have seen God heal. I have literally seen him heal from, like, the point of no return. But why didn't it happen here? And I prayed for healing, and that healing came from him being whole now in heaven. Like, he's not suffering. He's not having to deal with any of that. My family isn't having to. I met a mom whose son also had TGA, and she was saying, her son was 3 and or 4, and just randomly one day just crashed in his home. You know what I'm saying? Like, to always have that what if was so I still don't have all the answers. I still don't understand why, especially because it shocked everyone. All the nurses, all the doctors. The doctors were sitting there like, I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. But one thing that came from that was when I left, the nurse was so sweet and so kind. Her name was 𝙁𝙙𝙙𝙙𝙬𝙙, and she had been his nurse a couple times, and we had talked about cloth diapers and all of that. And she was part of the bereavement kind of council.
Gotcha.
And she made sure I got footprints, handprints, gave him his last bath, got the hair, any sort of keepsakes that I wanted to keep, I was able to get from her. She was so sweet. She was like, I gave him a little cloth diaper, and I held him as I brought him down to the morgue. Like, not to be carted off,
A lot. And you're getting a lot of love. I just want you to know, you probably aren't seeing it as you're sharing, but there's everyone saying they love you, and so you're getting a lot of love and support as you share this.
I appreciate that. But she was so sweet, and I was handed all of these resources, and none of those were helpful. Like, none of them were helpful. A place to donate my breast milk, sure, but like, none of them were helpful. And like, how do I even explain this to my kids? They don't even, like, what are they even going to think? What are they going to say? And I also remember so many families in there were only Spanish speaking. And, to hear, how a surgery went from a translator is totally different.
Correct.
And not be able to communicate. And so I kept in touch with 𝙁𝙙𝙙𝙬𝙙𝙬𝙀, and she just randomly sometimes sends me certain things. So she'd be like, oh, I was thinking of Beau today. And I love when people mention him and mention his story. All of my sisters in love, they just randomly will say things like, oh, I was thinking of you and Beau today. But I was really, really inspired to write the book because we were able to talk to our children about the loss from our faith and from the understanding that God is perfect and he is good. And sometimes things don't make sense to us, but that's okay. And Beau is healed in heaven, and we always have him. He's always here. But it looks a little different than what we expected. And just realizing when I was looking for books online and looking for this, I talked to this child psychologist who basically said everything that the boys are doing is like amazing. It's like what we would do in therapy. And they were doing all of that on their own. But there was just like no resources with children of color, or no resources specifically talking about like, yes, you lost a sibling, but your sibling is still with you. Yes, you lost a sibling, but we believe in heaven. And so I wrote the book because it was all inspired by the conversations that me and my husband had with the kids. Answering little questions.
Because I know you mentioned the book, but this is the book for those of you, and she has her copy, I have mine, called Beyond the Rainbow. And I'll let her share, you know, how you can get your hands on it. I want you, now, this is the thing about this book, let me tell y'all. I read this book, not only is it beautiful, but not only did she write it, she illustrated this book. And I mean, if you can see these illustrations, they're very like realistic. I'm looking at this picture of, I believe it's probably Junior in his bed. And that is very much one of the children that we had seen walk across the street.
One of the ones that, one of my cameo stars.
Correct. And just talk about the process of it, because it's one thing to be going through what you went through, to be grieving your son, but now somehow in the midst of this, and obviously we know it's God, that you can look around you, see other people who are suffering, see people who are not even able to speak the language that the hospital staff is able to speak, but you know and you understand. And somehow in your mind, you realize, yes, I know I'm grieving. Yes, I know this is hard. Yes, I wish I wasn't going through this, but I can do something that is going to make a difference and that is going to be able to help. And you started this book process almost immediately, even though it took a little bit of time.
Yeah, so I wrote a very rough draft, like probably within the first several months. And then I wrote the actual version that you see now, probably a year, like around the anniversary of his death. It took another year to illustrate it, just because it was very emotional illustrating it. I didn't know what I had wanted to do. And then like, I mean, I distinctly remember like being in Starbucks for 3 hours straight and like crying, and people were probably looking at me crazy, but mapping out what I wanted each page to look like, and then kind of dealing with the ins and outs of Amazon KDP and like sizing differences and stuff. My mother translated it, which was awesome, because I know Spanish, but not like her.
Right.
And it was very, very, very cathartic and amazing to be able to give this resource that if I had this when Beau first passed away, it would feel like such a relief to be able to have a guide to talk to my children who are living about this, even adults, about like, yes, I'm sad and yes, I'm grieving, but I know God is real, and I believe that we have everlasting life through Jesus. And because of that, these are all of the little ways that God shows me that he's still with me. And I don't know if you guys saw my most recent post. My son, he was at the championship game, his team got second, but when they said his name to give him his little medal, a huge butterfly like came as soon as they said his name, came down, landed on the green, and then like flew up near him, almost landed on his shoulder. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what we talk about. One of the things in the book is like, it's the butterfly that comes, is there. So it was really amazing it's amazing also to have the boys like catch on to that. And I love that not only do you give
the story, but one of my favorite parts of the book is obviously you have the last page that shows your entire family.
Yes.
Even with little Beau here at the bottom. But then you also, for those that may not be believers or don't know where a lot of these references and things you're talking about come from, you have the scriptures here to explain kind of the hope that you have in the book. And I think that's such a bold move and a beautiful move for a children's book, especially because there are going to be people, obviously, that are believers that are going to be drawn to it. But this is a book that is for anyone. And if they aren't, then you are also really sharing some of the gospel with them as well.
Exactly.
And helping them get through this grief. So
exactly.
That is a beautiful thing.
For some of the moms who are having that tough time of like, I know God is good, but why? You know? And the same thing with kids. The book helps kind of reel that back in. The guidance counselor at my son's school actually has it. And she said one day, you know, Cruz was having a tough time at lunch for whatever reason. One thing I realized about children is that at each growth stage, they kind of process things differently. And just like we're always thinking about our family and our friends and stuff, they are too. And think about their sibling who's not here. It's a little different. And she just took him to her office and they read the copy that she has there. And he immediately was like better. Another thing, the nurse, I did give the nurse a copy of the book, both in Spanish and in English, because I did want to make sure that the hospital had both. And there were these blank pages in the back of the book, which I had no idea why they put them in there, right? I was like, I don't know why there's this like one full page, blank page. And I was going to call Amazon and ask them, and then she sent me a photo. She's like, I'm giving this to one of the families today, to a family today. You know, that's an unfortunate thing in general. But then she was like, I was able to put the footprints, the handprints, and all of the artwork that I do for the family in the book. That's in those blank pages in the back. And I was like, God is good in everything that in everything that we think doesn't make sense. It makes sense. And then also the for the moms who I have connected with, there was a particular mom, and she's not on Instagram anymore, so I don't know how to find her, but she said her daughter and Beau actually have the same birthday, just a year apart, and she lost her daughter. And she said that it's the only book that like stays off the shelf. Wow. It stays off the shelf, and it helps her 3 living boys understand that they aren't the only kids who are dealing with this. They're not alone. And that was huge because I didn't even think of it from that standpoint. I was just like, oh, parents, what do you do when your kid is asking you these questions? But like having the kids be like, you know, I'm not like ostracized because I lost a child, you know? Yes, it could also be for people's prayers.
Yes, I saw that. That's such a good thing. Thank you for that, Tej. So good.
Yeah, I had actually thought about like if you wanted, like each of the boys has their own copy because they wanted their own copy. But if they want to write, like they would write letters to him or like draw pictures, and to be able to do that in the book, in the copy that you have. I've also thought about that too, like having it be for the kids if you give it to the kids. So, but it was a passion project, therapeutic project for me, not only to get Beau's story out there because you know, God is good in everything, and this was my worst fear, and I lived through it by the grace of God. That grace was also seen in the hospital. Like a lot of the nurses kept saying that, like, you guys are like pillars of faith and strength. And the boys talking through it and being able to like very matter of factly be like, yeah, I have a baby brother. He would have been 3, you know, but he's in heaven. And to not be shy about it, and not be ashamed of it. Exactly.
This is their life. This is a part of their life story.
And to be able to work through all of those feelings that they have, like if they're sad at night, and there's a part in the book where it's like, when you're feeling that, just think of he's just with you. And when you feel that, don't try to be sad about it. Try to like just talk to him and you'll feel better.
Good.
So yeah, it is the first of many books, but it is definitely one that and my purse just knocked over this picture of him. He's here. But it's one that I was very, very passionate about getting out there as soon as possible because it was something that if I had it then, I would have been able to have this conversation. I mean, we had the conversation earlier.
Right.
Because obviously this is based off of the conversation that we had. But if I was another parent, trying to wrap my head around what just happened, this takes the brain work out of that.
Yeah, so. For sure. Well, Adriana, your story is incredible. I know that it is still evolving and still growing.
Yes.
I'm thankful that you were able to go through such a very tough experience. And again, God was able to make beauty out of those ashes. And now not only do you have a book that has Beau's name, but that's something that will carry on his legacy. And now you're helping other families be able to do something that you had to do without the resource, and now they can do with that resource.
Exactly.
I know we've been on for a little over an hour, but I wanted to, allow people to find out where they can find the book. I know you mentioned Amazon.
Yes.
I know you also have your own website that they can also get the book from. So please tell people where they can find the book, a little bit more about your website, and then also how they can follow you and continue to follow your story and kind of keep in touch with you.
Yes. So you guys can follow me as I release the new books, all based on kingdom principles, especially kingdom principles to explain to your children. I will be releasing and putting announcements on both my Instagram and then also on my website. My website is 𝙁𝙤𝙙𝙬𝙙𝙤𝙀𝙁. So BEAUS garden.com. Inspired by Beau, obviously, but hopefully with growth of eventually maybe a nonprofit to support families and or research specifically because Black and brown children who are born with CHD are more likely to pass. So finding out why, and then also just increasing resources for burials and being able to honor your children who pass, because that's not something that anyone expects, especially a new baby. I also, as I mentioned, have a few different books in the works specifically for teaching children kingdom principles in a way that also introduces scripture, as you mentioned. And yeah. Well, definitely get CPR certified if you are around children, around infants. Get CPR certified. Have your kids be CPR certified. Anybody and everybody get CPR certified because
that's good to know.
It bought us time.
Yeah, that's good. Well, thank you so much for being on here with me. I am so glad that I had a chance to be introduced to you.
Yes.
I have to hit up my cousin Denise and thank her so much.
Thank you, Denise.
I know she was on here. I know she's still on here, but Denise, we appreciate you. You gave such a wealth of information from a gamut of things, and I'm so grateful for that. And again, we don't know why God does the things that he does, but I'm so grateful that you are able to still work past the hurt and still be able to work past what's going on. Oh, there she is.
Yeah.
And thank you. I'm glad that you were able to put your website in there and give them your Instagram. I see it there, but give them their Instagram too if anyone's not following you and they want to follow you after they've had a chance to watch this.
Yes. And then also to get the book, whether you want it in English or in Spanish, you can find the Amazon link through 𝙁𝙤𝙙𝙬𝙙𝙬𝙬 so it's a little bit easier to navigate where to find it if you go to the website.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing this story. And just know that, we've had these talks and we got a chance to talk a little bit earlier today, but I know that God has an enormous plan for you and you are walking it out. And I'm sure that your platform is just going to continue to be elevated because you have such a genuine level of care. And again, the amount of information that you have to empower women to be sure that they speak up for themselves when they are in these labor and delivery situations, to be sure that we also know the holistic aspects of things behind our pregnancies and that we don't necessarily always have to be pushed onto with the medications and different, things that are given to us. And then obviously just to be able to be encouraged that even if we don't get the answer of the prayer we thought that we were going to get, seeing God's hands in the answers that he gives regardless. And I'm just happy. I'm glad that you have two other boys that are here with us physically, that are flourishing, as cute as can be, who made a little appearances while they were there. And I look forward to sharing this. For those of you that are watching, if you only caught a little part of it, once we get off this live, it will be immediately on my feed. And sometimes it allows me to, and sometimes it doesn't allow me to. But I think I should be able to invite her as a collaborator so she can have it on her feed too. Awesome. But I will be sure to put it on my feed, put it in my stories, and then by the end of next week, I will have it up on YouTube. I will send her the link. I know there's some people who are only on Facebook or who aren't on Instagram, so that way she'll have the story and it'll be packaged beautifully with pictures and all the things, so that she'll be able to have that and use that on her website as well.
Yes, thank you.
And of course, be sure to follow her. And for those of you that may have come on to support Adriana who do not know me, I'm Shani. My Instagram is @ShaniSpeaksNow, and my YouTube is ShaniSpeaksNow channel. So when it is up there, you'll be able to go and see that. But I'm just so grateful for this conversation. I am learning so much with every story of every woman. They've all been so different. They've all been so unique, but there's still a level of courageousness and bravery and integrity and vulnerability and transparency that I just haven't seen anywhere else. And for that, I'm forever, forever grateful. So thank you so much for sharing your story. My next story will be July 23rd, and it will be my labor and delivery story. So it is actually going to focus on, again, the whole aspect of maternal health and how things can go terribly wrong sometimes. But thankfully, there is a good ending to that story for the person that will be sharing, and that will be July 23rd. So continue to follow so you know when I'll have my next live. And Adriana, I hope that you have a great rest of your Sunday. I hope everybody has a great rest of their Sunday. If you haven't had your Sunday dinner or any of those sorts of things, go ahead and get your eat on. Lord knows that's what I need to do that.
One last thing to say, a consejo for anyone, if you know anyone who has lost a child or has lost a pregnancy or anything, just know the best thing that you can do is not try to make them feel better. Nothing will make them feel better.
That's good.
Heaven was missing an angel, or too beautiful for this earth.
Or at least you have the experience of having the child, or experience.
At least you know you can get pregnant.
Yes, all that.
The number one thing that you can do is say, I do not know what you're going through, but I am here for what you need.
That is good.
And understand, like, unless they say, God needed him, or, whatever, he's in a better place. Unless they say it, just, even if you're thinking it, just don't say it.
Listen, that is
like the number one advice is just say, I don't know what you're going through, but I'm here for what you need. And whether that's just getting them a copy of the book because you don't know what to say, or just being like, hey, do you need me to just sit?
Listen,
if they have
a
name,
just be there.
Yeah, and if they had a name for their child, or their child was born, make sure you say that name.
Absolutely.
As much, and just, you don't have to say anything other than, I was thinking of you and so and so.
Yeah.
You and so were on my mind. And that is probably those little messages that I got afterwards made me feel like he was that much more real.
Correct.
And then that much more supported, where I don't have to give you anything in return. Just thank you so much. But that's the best advice that I can give, is just say, I don't know what you're going through,
but I'm here.
But I love you. And I'm here for whatever you need. And I'm here for whatever you and Beau need. Or I'm thinking of you and Beau. Because it matters.
It does.
You don't have to be afraid to say their name. It will warm their heart to say their name, because they don't hear it as much as their living children's names, or they don't hear it anywhere outside of their walls. So that's something to just think of.
No, I appreciate appreciate that, and I agree. I say my son Day's name often, even though I didn't get a chance to physically meet him here, but it's true. It just allows that person to realize what you went through is real. We acknowledge that it happened, and we want you to know that we're here for you.
Yes.
And that's it. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. That is a great way to end this, by allowing people to know how they can support people who may experience some of these losses when it comes to pregnancy and the reproductive health.
1 in 4 women.
Yep.
1 in 4 women. So you know somebody who knows somebody, or you are
25% of pregnancies. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's happening more than we realize. So
thank you so much
for
the opportunity to
Adriana.
talk.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. Thank you all so much for being on here, for all of your support, all of your comments. I really, really, really appreciate it. Again, this will be up very shortly on our feed, and then I will share it on YouTube. But I hope that you all have a beautiful Sunday, and I'll see you next month in July.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care. Have a good night.
You too.
Adriana, thank you for sharing your painful yet inspirational testimony and pouring it all out into a book that can serve others. We look forward to your future books. And if you'd like to share your story live, remember you can email me directly at hi@ShaniSpeaksNow.com or DM me directly on Instagram. Didn't get a chance to watch? Well, you can listen wherever you listen to podcasts on Shani Speaks Now, the podcast. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. And remember, always keep the faith and let the Lord fight your battles.